Hey everyone, and welcome back to Brains Are Beautiful. In this episode, we're going to be working on completing the square. You may have done this already in your classes. However, for this particular video, we're going to use completing the square to derive the quadratic formula. And you may be thinking right off the bat, well, that's useless. I don't need how to derive it because I already know how to use it. But actually, it's always, all my life, I've had it on any sort of Algebra 1 test or STAR test or even, I believe, the SAT. So it actually is really, really important that you at least see this and recognize the steps. So I want to walk you through the steps just so you can understand it and be able to pick it out at least on a multiple choice test. So with that being said, we're going to start with the form of the quadratic equation in standard form. So ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So just for a refresher, this is the squared term, this is the quadratic term, and then this is the constant. So everything is on one side of the equation and completely simplified. So we're going to start this process by subtracting the constant from both sides. So minus c and minus c. Ax squared plus bx equals negative c. So we subtracted c from both sides. Now we're going to divide both sides by a. That's going to leave us with x squared, because the a's cancel out, plus b over ax equals minus c over a. So we just divided both sides by a. From there, we're going to do a little bit of manipulating. So we have, what we want to do is we want to get b over 2 squared. So that's b over 2 squared. And when we talk about b over 2 squared, we're talking about that first term. Like, see how this term right here, right here is b? That's the term we want to use as b in this equation. So right now that term is all of this, b over a. So we're going to say this is going to equal b over a all divided by 2 squared. And of course we can simplify this to b over 2a all squared. And that could further simplify to b squared over 4a squared. So let's plug those into the equation. So in doing this, we're going to get x squared plus b over ax, and then we're going to add this term in. And we can use either form. Personally, what I think is simpler and makes my life easier when I used to do these was to plug in on this side this way it's written, and on the other side plug in the other way. So I'm going to go plus b over 2a squared equals negative c over a plus, and now I'm going to put it in this side. You don't have to separate these and do it differently, but I think it saves you a step in the long run, and they're the same exact thing. So b squared over 4a squared. And now we're just going to slightly rearrange the right-hand side of the equation. So x squared plus b over ax plus b over 2a quantity squared equals b squared over 4a squared minus c, sorry about that, minus c over a. Okay, so then from there, we need to combine this right-hand side. So we're going to make common denominators. So the left hand stays the same. You guys can just copy it down. X squared plus b over ax plus b over 2a quantity squared equals, and so now what I'm going to do for this side to combine these is I'm going to find the LCD, which is basically just the 4a squared. So I'm going to multiply this last term by 4a over 4a, which is essentially multiplying by 1. And what you do to the top of the fraction, you gotta do to the bottom of the fraction. So that's gonna leave us with b squared over 4a squared, that term doesn't change at all, minus 4ac all over 4a squared, which of course can be combined into one fraction. So let's go ahead and do that. X squared plus b over ax plus b over 2a squared equals b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. All right, so now this is where the terminology completing the square comes in, because basically we're going to factor the left-hand side of the equation and then take the square root. And when we factor this left-hand side, we're making it a perfect square. And so how we factor, and this is why we left it in this form right here for this fraction, because it makes our life easier. We're going to factor as x plus b over 2a quantity squared. And you can do the math and you can FOIL this out right here, and you'll see that it does turn out to be this part of the equation. And then we're just going to keep this right hand side the same. 4ac all over 2, oops, sorry guys, all over 4a squared. All right, so then moving on, we're going to take the square root of both sides. And basically what we're doing now is we're solving for x. So in order to get x by itself, we're going to start by taking the square root. So when we take the square root, we're going to go square root. And when we take a square root, when we personally add the square root, we have to say plus or minus. So that's where that comes from. And then we know that a square and a square root cancels itself, so we can cross that out. And we're left with, on the left-hand side, x plus b over 2a, which then is equal to plus or minus, and I'm just going to separate the square root on the numerator and the denominator, b squared minus 4ac all over the square root of 4a squared. So you guys know that you can just take, if you have a square root of an entire fraction, it's the same thing as the square root of the top of the fraction divided by the square root of the bottom of the fraction. So then from there, I'm just going to simplify the right-hand side a little bit further. X plus b over 2a equals plus or minus, the top has to stay the same, so b squared minus 4ac, but the bottom you can actually do the square root, and that's going to leave us with 2a on the bottom. So now, continuing our process of solving for x, we're just going to subtract b over 2a from both sides to get x by itself. X equals negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then when we look at this, we notice these two fractions have the same denominator. So let's combine them. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. And this is our answer, and this is the quadratic formula. So we literally went from the standard form of the quadratic equation and derived the quadratic formula, which is pretty cool because it shows how they're all interrelated. Doing this, we also found out how to complete the square, which we can use for numbers as well as for variables like we did here. So thanks guys for watching, and like I said, this can be a tricky concept, but you guys can get it. I know you can. Go ahead and watch this video and do a bunch of practice examples, and please leave any comments if you want more examples or other videos, and thanks guys for watching, and remember, brains are beautiful.